Everybody. So Donald Trump isn't even in office yet, but his promises of retribution against the news media are already becoming reality. Trump is now suing Iowa pollster Ann Seltzer and the Des Moines Register over her final pre-election poll that showed Vice President Harris beating him in the Hawkeye state. Now, Trump's lawyers have been warning journalists and others of defamation lawsuits for what they've said or written, both before and after the election. So have two of Trump's cabinet picks, Pete Hegseth and Kash Patel. As the New York Times notes, the small flurry of threatened defamation lawsuits is the latest sign that the incoming Trump administration appears poised to do what it can to crack down on unfavorable media coverage now and after the election. So before and after the election, Mr. Trump and his allies have discussed subpoenaing news organizations, prosecuting journalists and their sources, revoking networks' broadcast licenses, and eliminating funding for public radio and television. Joining us now, our conservative lawyer, George Conway, and host of the Fast Politics podcast and a special correspondent for Vanity Fair, our friend and fan favorite, Molly Jong-Fast.
Good morning to both of you. George, I'm sure you were shocked, absolutely shocked by all of this, though it is sort of amazing, right, the length of the list of folks he's going after, pollsters, police, January 6th committee members, legacy media. Did the Constitution imagine this, right? What kind of guardrails are there, constitutionally speaking, to prevent a tyrant like this from a retribution tour?
Well, it's not just the Constitution, it's the laws. You have to actually have laws that are violated to bring these actions, whether they be brought in his personal capacity or by the government. This is all nonsense. Especially suing the pollster for there is no claim for suing a pollster for putting out a poll that ends up not predicting the right results. And polls aren't supposed to be predictive. And think about this. He's saying that Ann Seltzer and the Des Moines Register lied about a poll. There is no person on this planet who has lied more about polls than Donald J. Trump. I mean, he's always saying he's ahead. He's never behind the polls. In 2019, Tony Fabrizio's polls showing that he was in trouble were leaked to the New York Times and other newspapers, and Trump denied that they even existed. He lied about that. And not only that, he lied about actual election results and thereby caused an insurrection. So the absurdity of all of these things that he's trying to do is it's all gaslighting. And it's all intimidation and bullying, because that's what narcissists do. He's trying to bully everyone. And some people are being bullied. And he's trying to make everybody afraid of him. But, what's going to happen is he's going to overreach in some of these lawsuits. Like this Des Moines Register lawsuit is just, the lawyers should be sanctioned. They may very well be sanctioned. And, these lawsuits are going to go nowhere. And he's going to have egg on his face. He's going to look like the fool that he is.
On Monday, almost a week ago, Donald Trump actually spoke about the lawsuits at Mar-a-Lago against the press. Take a listen.
I feel I have to do this. I shouldn't really be the one to do it. It should have been Justice Department or somebody else, but I have to do it. It costs a lot of money to do it, but we have to straighten out the press. Our press is very corrupt, almost as corrupt as our elections.
I heard this, and I think about the fact that people often talk about, there's guardrails, and I'm like, the guardrails are few and far between, and people are not actually willing to stand up and do their due diligence. You have to actively protect democracy. It just doesn't happen on its own. And in 1964, during the Civil Rights Movement, but all the way up through 1964, news organizations were regularly sued for libel, right, by governments, by local, people were suing for libel, and it was a Supreme Court case, New York Times v. Sullivan, that ended up protecting the press, protecting them from libel lawsuits, and really reinforcing the freedom of the press to report vigorously. That Supreme Court precedent still stands today, yet civil lawsuits left and right are being brought.
Yeah, but most of these lawsuits never go anywhere. Most libel lawsuits, defamation lawsuits don't go anywhere. They make a big splash, and then they're ultimately dismissed, or they're settled with an apology or something, or they're just withdrawn.
But that's what I mean, George. But isn't that part of the chilling effect?
Yeah, no,
like that it doesn't
is.
actually go anywhere. But if someone is someone pays money, like ABC has a $15 million judgment.
That was ridiculous.
Well, they're paying it, and George Stephanopoulos is also on the hook for $1 million of his own money. Someone threatening a lawsuit, then people maybe think twice about if they really want to be even slightly critical of the folks in charge, even if it's warranted.
Right. No, I mean, and that is a problem. I mean, because this is how the intimidation works. They're trying to impose costs on people, and you know, this is one of the ways they're trying to make people obey in advance, to use Professor Snyder's words, and it can work, because it's like, is it worth it to any single individual to just say something if they're going to incur this cost? And that's why you're absolutely right. People have to band together. We have to work and help defend. First of all, these media organizations can't cave the way ABC did, which was outrageous. But also, you know, there has to be a lot. I think lawyers really need to step up now. Lawyers need to volunteer their time and volunteer their services and learn new tricks and learn new trades. I think that one of the things I've been suggesting to people is that we have a continuing legal education program for litigators to learn new areas of law, like defamation law, like privacy law, like whistleblower protection law, or Merit Systems Protection Board law. And it's really incumbent on people to stand up and do something, because if you don't do that, then they win by intimidation, even if they don't actually win these lawsuits.
Hey, Molly, George said the thing to me that at the core of this is the heart of it. When he used the word, you know, the single, you know, acting in a singular fashion in response to all of this. No single entity, no single individual wants to go through this. And this goes to the heart of an NBC News op-ed by David Bleier, noting this argument is both silly and scary. From my perspective as a pollster, not a lawyer, a flawed methodology, not criminal intent, likely led Seltzer to miss Trump's voters in Iowa. But the fact that Trump brought the lawsuit at all is troubling. If politicians sue pollsters for mistakes, pollsters will stop publishing surprising results, and the whole political system will suffer. You know, this air or this sense of, oh my gosh, there's nothing we can do, you know, this will have a chilling effect, to me misses the mark. Where I think, whether it's ABC or anybody else who gets in those crosshairs, and we talked about this in the last segment, about the House leadership, Republicans in the House, the Republicans in the Senate. You know, when there's 170 members you now have to primary, you're not primarying anybody. All right, you're not going to go down that road, because all of a sudden now the numbers change for you. If, to George's point about lawyers learning the updated craft that's required in order to defend against some of this, the same has got to be true, I think, for the media. I'm surprised that the media is not locking arms. I didn't see other networks and other outlets come to the defense of ABC, standing knowing that they could be next and likely are next. What's your thoughts there in terms of much more of a, hey, we're all in the crosshairs here, as opposed to this sort of competitive kind of, oh, we still got to get, you know, one more viewer than you, which then loses sight of the fact that you've now possibly exposed yourself to the same thing that we see other outlets and networks and individuals exposed to. There is strength in numbers here, I think.
So I would say two things. One, George has I hate to agree with George, but he has a very good point here about lawyers needing to set up guardrails, right? To set up, you know, to protect these journalists, because a lot of journalists, you know, need to know that there's someone. I mean, they don't make millions of dollars, most journalists. And so especially people who are doing this reporting that's so important, you know, the kind of stuff that really does shed the, sort of show light on things that's very important that we otherwise might not know about. So for sure, lawyers donating their time is a big deal because then it creates a kind of permission and a kind of ability of people to be brave. What George is talking about, which I think is so important, is this idea that we need to be brave, right? We need to be brave. Liz Cheney, really good statement. I don't agree with her politically about anything, but really good statement about how she doesn't want a pardon. She's going to stand up for this. George has been really brave about just saying, I am going to stand up for what's right, and this is ridiculous. Look, the mainstream media is not in the place it was in 2016. 2016, there were many more outlets. There was much more money. There was, a sort of belief in the mainstream media from the right and the left. That is no longer true. There are many fewer outlets. There's much less money. There's much less, goodwill towards the mainstream media than there was 8 years ago. This is just a sort of husk of a business anymore. And so, in my mind, the goal has to be, because this is really, protect norms and institutions. And that means the kind of journalism, the kind of reporting that ProPublica does, the stuff that is very expensive, very important, and hard to replicate anywhere else.